All right, welcome into the Hoist the Colors podcast. It is Sunday night, and the HTC podcast is back, and we're back with a familiar guest. It has been a while since we've been on this channel because of our radio show at 94.3 The Game, but we have the return of Brett Hickman down at Anderson, who is getting ready for their inaugural season in 2024. So he's been very busy, but Brett, you guys are now on the eve of your first season ever. I know you've been busy with that, but can't be happier to have you back, man. And we got some exciting news to talk about. But welcome back to the HCC Pod.
Yeah, man, it's great to be back and kind of swimming right here. We just got through a fall developmental season. Been practicing a lot of football, but had a chance to watch a lot this fall and spend some time with my family. And obviously, the Pirates are never far from my mind, and just glad to be back on and talk about some of the transitions that are going on in the ECU program as they move forward into 2024.
No doubt, 2-10 coming off the season, and we expected big changes. There were big changes, Brett, and just a really we'll kind of go through just. I want to add first off, we are live on YouTube, Facebook. We already got a bunch of live viewers. So if you want to drop a question there, we'll get to it throughout our show. We'll see how long we can go. Both of us busy and tired, but hey, we're here for the Pirates, and it should be a fun show. One other announcement before we get going. So I've gotten a lot of questions. Hey, what's happened to the Hoist the Colors podcast? So we're still doing a daily show, 94.3 The Game. It's on a different channel. If you search Hoist the Colors 94.3 The Game, you can find us there. So this channel has not been as active due to that venture we've started, but we're still going to do this podcast definitely as much as possible. And obviously we're getting Brett on this, so happy to have Brett on. And we got a bunch of subscribers to this channel, so glad to be back on this channel. But check us out on the other one as well. Bobby Harwood has jumped in the comments section. He has already noticed your title, Brett, runner-up for the OC job. As I did report, you were one of the front runners until John David Baker beat you out.
Yeah, it would have been I would have loved to have seen the reaction if Coach Houston hired a Division II defensive coordinator whose play calling experience is limited to 2 seasons at West Brunswick High School, in which I could not find an offensive coordinator. So instead of calling the defense, I switched over to that side of the ball. So that would have been a tough sell to the Pirate Nation. Though I think we lit it up for about 27 a game those 2 years, and I'm a defensive coach. So I was not a candidate, despite what you said.
Yeah, we were having some fun. Hey, 27 a game. I think Pirate fans would have taken that this past year. That would have led to a lot of wins.
They'd have a football game coming up if that would have happened, for sure. 27 a game probably would have gotten them to 6 or 7, in my opinion.
There's no doubt. Chuck, he asked, is this live? It is live. We are live on Sunday night. Unless you're listening to our podcast version or watching our replay, of course, then we're not live. But we are live as we do this, so drop a question. All right, Brett, the hire, John David Baker, for our subscribers. He was one of the first names we reported involved in the search. Wednesday, he interviewed. I heard it went extremely well. They had other candidates, involved, Chad Morris, Bailey from Ohio State, but it just always felt like they really wanted John David Baker, and he wanted to be here. We'll talk to him for the first time on Monday, but just your initial thoughts on the hiring of the Ole Miss co-OC, John David Baker, to be ECU's new coordinator.
Yeah, I think when you and I were discussing earlier in the week of potential names and when it kind of came into focus on your end on who the viable candidates were, that's the one that probably made the most sense to me. Now, there's always a Peter principle thing when you start dealing with a guy who's really a first-time coordinator or a first-time head coach, that you don't really know until he gets thrown in the fire how good of a job that he's going to do. For instance, there's slam dunk can't miss head coaches that miss. Happens all the time. And then there's can't miss slam dunk coordinators that miss, and it just doesn't work out. But the guy's got a pedigree. I thought it was important to get a guy who's played quarterback, has been in that room in a modern system. For instance, I believe he played at Abilene Christian. And then the people and the quality of offensive coaches that that Coach Baker's worked for is second to none. I mean, when you start seeing guys like Lane Kiffin and what Lane's done over the course of his career in a wide variety of systems. Coach Kiffin started as a true West Coast guy when he was at USC with Pete Carroll, and then of course morphed when he went to Alabama and got all in on the RPO game, and then got hooked up with Kendall Briles and Jeff Lebby, and he's implemented various run schemes and along with the kind of the Briles veer and shoot passing game. So what they've done at Ole Miss is special. I mean, because Ole Miss is not recruiting the same type of player that LSU and Alabama are recruiting. They're just not, and they're sitting here with double-digit wins 2 years in a row. But it wasn't just the time with Kiffin. Seth Luttrell was working for him and working for Clay Helton. Those are two guys that have moved the football wherever they've been and scored a lot of points. Luttrell was the OC for Larry Fedora at North Carolina, and they combined the power run game with some air raid principles, and I really think a lot of him. And he just got promoted at Oklahoma to follow Jeff Lebby there. So the guys worked for some really good people. He played quarterback. He checks a lot of the boxes. Time's certainly going to tell, but I think the easy thing for Coach Houston to do would have been to hire Chad Morris. Proven commodity. But I think at that point you're swinging for a single, maybe a double. This one might be a swing and a miss, strike three, whatever, but it's got the chance to be the home run. And I really think that's what he feels like this program needs offensively, not only to get back to respectability, but to build a football team that can be one of the better programs in the AAC moving forward. And with the landscape that's changed in the conference, there's no reason why East Carolina, with the resources, with the fan support, shouldn't be a team that's competing for an AAC championship on a yearly or at least bi-yearly basis, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially with the amount of resources the athletic department is putting into football now. You look at what ECU is able to pay this coordinator and also pay its staff overall. ECU ranks near the top of the league in pay, so you expect to be able to compete towards the top of the league. So I think that's definitely a factor in this. 2 or 3 years ago, I'm not sure you can make this hire, Brett. So that you got to give the administration credit for stepping up and paying these guys. I mean, he's going to be making well over $400,000. I do think he will be taking a pay cut. I've heard talks he may have gotten a 2-year deal. We'll try to confirm that. We've requested the contract. We'll try to confirm that in the coming days. Chuck says, I like the hire of a young and energetic coach. I agree, Brett. Also, you mentioned it, Ole Miss. I mean, certainly they get athletes, but compared to their competition, they're typically not the most talented team in the SEC. So for me, when I looked at the guy from Ohio State, clearly he's done a good job. He's got a bright future, but also Chad Morris at Clemson has some pretty good talent. I definitely wanted a guy who had not necessarily done more with less, but has shown the ability to been around offenses that can scheme up things more so than just win on talent alone. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've always said, I guess 16 years of doing this and a lifetime being around it, with my dad being a head coach, I've always thought that defense starts with depth of personnel. How many quality players can you get, and the culture and the effort of which you play with. Offense, obviously, I think you need depth of personnel on the O-line. If you can be rock solid across the board, that's important. But you got to get difference makers on the offense. That's one way to do it. And East Carolina 2 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily say that was some revolutionary scheme they had, but there were dudes, at clear positions, whether or not it was Winstead or C.J. Johnson or Ryan Jones or Keaton Mitchell, guys who could score when they touched the ball. But you don't necessarily have to have the unbelievable people to be an efficient offense. Scheme is far more important on that side of the ball than I believe depth of personnel and culture is on defense. So if offense is, or pardon me, if defense is 60% personnel, offense is probably about 50% personnel, 40%. I think you can overcome some personnel deficiencies on offense with the ability to scheme some people up. So, that's clearly what they've done at Ole Miss. and they do, and we can get into the nuts and bolts if you want to, but the ability to run the football on those defensive lines in that league's not easy. And they're not just beating their head up against the wall with inside zone and A gap power and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of misdirection. There's a lot of inside zone schemes, but running it with a fly sweep and reading numbers on when to hand the fly sweep and when to hand off the inside zone. So there's just a lot of creativity in creating problems for the defense that I think is a really cool thing, and I think people are they're gonna see far more variety, particularly in the run game. That I think is going to give ECU a better chance um, with the talent that's on hand, and of course, if you want to get a lot better, you got to go get better players too. I don't think there's any doubt about that too.
All right, we'll talk about the scheme here shortly. I do want to address this question. We talked about it. We texted about it, and I figured it would come up. Chuck wants to know, how do you feel about John David Baker coaching Ole Miss in the bowl game? That was the report out of Oxford today. I actually like it, is what Chuck says, because it shows some integrity in coaching your players. I do know he will be on the road for ECU recruiting starting Tuesday, I believe is the plan. He'll actually be on campus tomorrow doing the introductory press conference, probably talking to players, coaches, etc. So your thoughts, Brett, on him coaching the bowl game despite taking the OC job at ECU?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's kind of a nothing burger if people don't understand. Like, if he's going to be at East Carolina recruiting, I think to understand, you got to understand exactly how bowl preparation works, right? So, Ole Miss will not practice this week. They probably won't practice until after exams get done on probably December 9th or 10th. So he's going to be at ECU all the way through then, at least recruiting. And then the portal is open right now, but I think people confuse the portal window with being the same as the recruiting calendar. The portal is just when kids can enter. All right, the recruiting calendar goes dead in Division One. I want to say on December the 18th. So as long as he's working and recruiting for East Carolina between now and December 18th, and he's available when portal guys or mid-year transfers come on campus between now and December the 18th, it's a nothing burger for what he does for himself between December 19th and January 3rd, because that's a dead period. So you can have contact. We could do a Zoom. He could do a Zoom with a quarterback transfer from whatever, Abilene Christian, since that's where he played. On December the 22nd. That kid can't come on campus anyway, and he can do that Zoom from Oxford, Mississippi, as easy as he can from a hotel in Greenville, North Carolina. So, and I think what people don't really realize is once you get on site for a bowl game, as a coach, you really don't do that much. You have practice maybe in the morning, and then the rest of the day you'll go back and watch the practice tape. But you got banquets, you got all kinds of these team bowling functions and all that crap. Half the time, our assistant coaches didn't go to those things. They'd stay in the room and work on. They'd stay in the room and work on recruiting. They'd go out to eat with their family. So he's got plenty of time in Atlanta and back in Oxford to do plenty of recruiting for East Carolina during that dead window. And then by the time the bowl game's over, I think they play on December 30th. He'll be back at East Carolina by the new year, ready for when guys can come back on campus, I believe the 3rd through the 7th of January. So a big nothing burger. I do think it speaks of it. I don't think he'll be very much involved in the bowl preparation in terms of the X's and O's for Ole Miss. I think he'll be more working for East Carolina during that time period. Probably December 10th through the 17th is probably when they'll start putting the game plan together. But as you know from covering it, bowl practices kind of that first week after exams, you're really working more on the bottom half of your roster. You're doing scrimmage stuff with the 3s and the 4s and the guys who redshirted and all that kind of stuff. And an analyst, Lane Kiffin, doesn't care if his tight end coach is there. I can promise you. An analyst can handle that. So when he shows up to coach the tight ends at Ole Miss in Atlanta, he can manage both jobs pretty easily. Or they're not in Atlanta. Where are they at? Cotton Bowl?
I think they are doing the Peach Bowl actually.
Okay, they're in the Peach
Yeah,
Bowl. Either way, he it won't be much of a problem at all.
right.
I like
And
that he's getting a chance to experience that
yeah,
too. I mean, now he can sell to those guys, hey, if we win the AAC, we're going to have a great chance to play in a bowl game that I just came from.
no doubt. And so, I mean, I think your perspective brings a lot of light to the situation too. And just with technology now, you can do, you can multitask as a coach easier than ever before. If this was the '90s or something, maybe this would be a little bit of a different story. But I think a lot of his focus will go on the ECUOC job, even if he is also coaching in that bowl game for sure.
Now,
Uh, but
I'd
yeah,
say it's different if you're the head coach. I think
right.
the quicker you can get on site and meet the dignitaries or meet the athletic department personnel and shake the hands of the money people, I think that's a little bit different deal. If we were hiring a head football coach, I would want him here right away because there's still work that can be done on campus during that dead period that's not necessarily pertinent to just recruiting. Um, so it's kind of a different deal, but in this case, not worried at all.
Yeah, we saw that with Scotty Montgomery. I remember that was a
Yeah,
whole
that's a terrible idea.
that was a whole ordeal. Brett Hickman is with us, and glad to have Brett back on the show. And so let's dive into a little bit of the scheme, Brett. At least what we see from Ole Miss now with John David Baker, he may bring a lot of that, but he may also pull from what he learned under Seth Luttrell, Graham Harrell at North Texas. Also may pull obviously from his time at USC, although Clay Helton, clearly worked under Kiffin as well at one point. So you got that branch, but very curious to see what his style will be. But when you watch Ole Miss, and I did some watching over the weekend as well, you just see the amount of motion, the amount of design, different designs in the running game. Like you said, not just inside zone, not just ISO power up the middle or something like that. Just a lot of different creative ways to get the ball, stretch the field horizontally, stretch it vertically. So just that's kind of the concept. When you watch the film of Ole Miss, what do you see that really stands out about this game?
Yeah, I think it's morphed all the advantages that really Chad Morris and Gus Malzahn had a decade ago as it relates to tempo. I think it's morphed a lot of the advantages of tempo with the RPO game and really two passing schemes, both the air raid and the Art Briles stuff. So he's kind of meshed. I say I'm talking about Coach Kiffin now. He's kind of meshed. He's created this beautiful conglomeration of combining, these guys who are at the forefront of the tempo game um, with really a beautiful college style passing game that East Carolina people are going to be familiar with. Like, I think it's important to say like this. Nothing East Carolina's done offensively under Donnie Kirkpatrick was unsound. Like every team in America runs inside zone. Every team in America runs four verts. Every team in America runs some version of mesh. Um, what I think there's going to be more scheme. There's definitely going to be more motion. There's going to be more creative formationing. For instance, pretty much East Carolina lined up in basic 11 personnel stuff. Not a whole lot of bunches. Not a whole lot of stacks. Not a whole lot of shifting. Not a whole lot of formation to the sideline. That's one thing that I think Ole Miss does a lot that puts people in a bind. They'll put trips receivers into the boundary and try and overload the short side of the field, and that causes a whole new set of problems for a defense. Do you align your nickel, or what East Carolina calls the Sam, to the strength of the formation, or do you align that guy to the wide side of the field? Well, if you start saying we're going to align him to the wide side of the field all the time, now you've got that rush guy out there as the overhang defender underneath the trip. So you got pass coverage problems over there. Well, if you line them up to the boundary all day, but they're always going to have the threat of running motioning back to the field, now we've got a lesser athlete, that rush guy in space trying to force the edge on the run, cover the pass. You put a worse athlete with more space problems. So there's a whole lot more going on, and they're going to do it at a faster tempo. The thing that I am most excited about is just the variety of which they do in the run game. Ole Miss has ran the football at an elite level the last 2 years, and some of that was Quinshawn Junkins. He was really good last year. I don't know exactly what they've had going on this year, but last year Dart really struggled, and they were still able to move the ball and score points. This year Dart's been a little bit better, but they still run the football really well. They're willing to run the quarterback. And anybody who's followed me on the boards the last couple of years, that's something that I hammered for the entire time Holton Ahlers was there. And obviously, after seeing the backup situation this year, we're not at practice every day. There's probably a reason why they didn't do that. But Lane Kiffin's got no problem running Jackson Dart in the SEC, and that team's ran the football at a elite clip, and I'm really expecting to see ECU improve tremendously in that instance.
When you watch them, Brett, how fast were they going on a regular, clip as far as tempo? Like, were they snapping it with 25, 30 seconds left on the play clock? Did it vary? I mean, we've seen very little tempo at ECU under Donnie Kirkpatrick and under Mike Houston the last 5 years. So that's gotta be something that changes, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is faster than what ECU's been running. As a defensive coordinator, I've never been as concerned about somebody who goes super fast the whole time. What I like about the Kiffin stuff is how multi-tempoed they are. They'll go you'll go super fast, and then you got to get a call in, and you think they're about to go super fast again, so you make a quick call. Then he does the old dummy check with you with everybody on the line, and he knows what you're in, so he goes, and it's a little bit slower that time. And then the next time, okay, is he going to dummy check me? So I don't want to show my hand, so I make the wrong call. Yada yada yada. So it's multi-tempoed and it's multi-formational, and it can cause a whole lot of problems.
No doubt. And the other thing too, Brad, I mean, just if you want to do a lot, obviously you got to be able to install it in a shorter amount of time. We all know how important this upcoming season is. So, this will be a first-time coordinator trying to do those things, trying to hire a staff. We'll get into that in a little bit as well, trying to fill out his offensive staff. But how realistic do you think it is in one offseason as a first-time coordinator? He can not only bring the personnel in that he needs, but also install enough of a scheme to make this as effective as ECU wants to be. And I guess the other side of it is, assuming ECU's defense returns basically intact, you've got a pretty good defense to bounce some things off of early in the season if you struggle at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier now than it's ever been to replenish a roster, because of the transfer portal. Now, we can get into the nuts and bolts as to whether or not that's the way to do it year after year. If you're going to be successful and build a program, I still think it starts with high school recruiting and player development. But in terms of the ability to replenish a roster right now, you can go out and get pieces. That portal is full of guys who can catch and they don't have to necessarily be great players. But for instance, East Carolina's gotten Chase Soule and Jaden Johnson, who I don't know if they're true number ones. Personally, I think Chase can be, but they're good players, and they're guys that can come in and be contributors right away. I do think it's a little bit harder to find that on the OL. But the key to this whole thing is just getting enough depth pieces, and of course finding a trigger man that can do it. As far as getting the system in, again, it's actually gotten easier to do that. You still get your 15 spring days. You get more time with your kids in the summer than you used to. Like when I was in school, when you sent your guys home in the summer, basically they were with Mike Golden all summer, and that was it. And then you had player-led practices and things of that nature. Now you can do OTA type stuff, training camps a little bit longer, the ability to have stuff online, whether or not it's through Visio or PowerPoint, Zoom meetings. So I actually think it's easier now than it's ever been to quick fix something, if that makes any sense.
Tony Hicks says, I'm only making an assumption, but JDB's top priority will be to fill the quarterback room with who will be the difference makers in 2024. That if you're running the RPO, if you're running any offense, Brett, the quarterback is obviously of utmost importance. But this guy, looking at this offense, quarterbacks got to be able to read defenses, make decisions. So I mean, it's vital. Now, I've talked with some people around the program. I don't know what the exact plan is at quarterback, but I've gotten the feeling they've got something up their sleeve they feel pretty good about. But certainly that will be the storyline in the coming week, seeing what quarterback is brought in.
I mean, it's guys. If you need to know the importance of quarterback in this day and age, and I'm a defensive coach. You know, I believe in running the football. I believe in playing great defense. I believe in playing great special teams. But if you want to compete at the highest level of any level, you know, from high school all the way to the National Football League, it starts and ends with that trigger man. And East Carolina's got to get one. You know, they got to get one that can efficiently run this offense, that can run it at a breakneck pace, that can distribute the ball. You know, it just the whole engine fails to crank when you don't have that position taken care of, and you know, it is of the utmost importance. And I'll be honest, I think I'd probably bring in two. You know, right now, I've seen the two guys they got on campus right now throw with my own two eyeballs, and honestly, I think the best thrower between those two is the walk-on Ty Little. Like he can rip it. He was in our league at when I was the head coach at West Brunswick. He can absolutely throw it. And Raheem Jeter is a little bit better of an athlete. There's going to be a place for that in this type of offense. But can a guy get up there under center and consistently distribute the ball, make right decisions with all of that, and crank the engine, so to speak? You know, that's everything. And we need one in place by whatever the date that second semester starts. He needs to be in there meeting with JDB the whole month of January and ready to crank that thing up by mid to late February in spring practice.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at minimum, Brett, you got to bring in two, and that's not counting Cole Hodge, the
Yep.
freshman who I like. He'll be in the summer. Unfortunately, just won his second straight state championship. He's a good player, but he can't enroll early due to his high school, due to where the semesters fall. So that hurts him. So I feel like unless Alex Flynn comes back, and I don't know where that stands right now. Even if he does come back, I think you got to bring in two because we know Mason Garcia's gone, Raheem Jeter unproven at this point, Ty Little walk on. So for me, it's like, how do you balance maybe trying to find a grad transfer or an upperclassman who has played, and then maybe potentially a guy for the future, either a JUCO. They've offered the kid out of they used to be at Southern Miss, and now they're recruiting him and his teammate Cam Wright out of the JUCO ranks. I don't know what John David Baker's assessment is of him, if he can win with him in this offense, but you got to find a way to get two and kind of juggle that. The good news is there's some NIL money coming in. I think they can, spend $200,000 on a quarterback and still have enough left over to, fill some other holes. But yeah, I think you got to go two. It's just, I guess it's a balancing act of trying to, sell to two guys. Hey, you can come in, compete for the starting position, but also you really want a proven commodity at this point, Brad. I mean, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm going after anyone and everyone who's played football at the FBS level to start with, whether or not that's a MAC or a Sun Belt guy, a guy who's played snaps at the G5 level, and I'm probably taking a flyer on a guy who it just hasn't worked out at the biggest level, who's got the ability. You know what I'm saying? And I include FCS guys in with that first realm. You know, if a guy's lit it up at the FCS level, they can come in and play. I forget the guy who played at Oregon a few years ago, but was at Eastern Washington. I mean, Vernon Adams, maybe. You know, a guy like that can come in. He can play at East Carolina if he's a proven commodity. It's just, I would take one guy who's played and then maybe take a flyer on a guy that you just really love his raw talent and, that's really willing to bet on himself, for instance. And, competition's a good thing. And if you're recruiting a guy who's afraid of competition, he ain't the guy. Just that's the way I see it. So money talks, make it competitive from an NIL standpoint and see who wants to come in and compete, knowing that it's going to come down. But if he's asking it to be handed to him, he needs to go somewhere else. That doesn't fit. Uh, that doesn't fit the East Carolina way. Sure as hell don't fit the way I like to look at things. I want people who want to come in and fight for everything. So yeah, we'll see where it lands. But I'd be really shocked if he doesn't have somebody that he's either recruited or they kind of messed with at Ole Miss that might have gone the G5 route or something like that. That's not in the portal that they kind of know what's going to happen now.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where too, if there are a lot of quarterbacks in the portal already, but and they do. I don't think anybody's afraid of competition, or like you said, if they are, then they don't need to come here. But they also want a realistic path to a starting job, and I think ECU at this point is as open as any quarterback room in the country. So that I think plays to ECU's favor, along with the fact they got some competition or some NIL competition to finally throw out there as well. Chad Pike says, "Why wouldn't a previous ECU quarterback be a good fit to hire?" Chad, I don't really understand your question. Are you saying like bringing in an ECU quarterback to coach under John David Baker? I don't know. Clarify that if you will, and we'll try and address that. Allen says, Pirate Al says the most critical hire will be the O-line hire. It all starts and stops with the Hogs. I hope the O-line coach has already been selected and he has the experience running what will be the JDB offense. Yeah, so according to our sources, it looks like ECU is making a change with the offensive line coach, also with the running backs coach. So new offensive coordinator, Brett, he's got to be able to implement a system. We talked about that. And certainly if your O-line coach and your OC aren't on the same page, it can look bad. I think we saw that this past year at times with ECU. So that's a massive hire for sure.
Yeah, the O-line coach is the most important guy. I kind of take my father was a long-time legendary North Carolina high school coach. He always said your two best football coaches need to be your O-line coach and your secondary coach. And I've always kind of lived by that. And I do think the O-line coach is so important to the offensive coordinator because that's the spot that really makes everything go, whether or not it's scheming up the run game, whether or not that's protections, having to work with the center and the quarterback all together. So my first instinct with Coach Mogridge being let go is that Baker's got a guy that he probably would not have taken the job if Coach Houston was not going to allow him to bring his own offensive line coach with him. So we'll see where that works out. But Allen's exactly right. It always starts up front on both sides of the ball. Win the line of scrimmage, win games. That will never change as long as they play this sport. If you can protect the passer and run the football, and you can stop the run on defense, you've always got a chance.
And how much do you feel like a new offensive line coach will look at the current personnel and the recruits coming in? And I don't know, like, is it really that big a difference, the type of offensive lineman that a offensive line coach, does that vary as much as people think it does?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, each coach has his own little niche and idiosyncrasies as it relates to recruiting and what type of player he likes, and how they evaluate talent and how they evaluate, what they want out of each position. And it's really nuanced stuff, sometimes it goes to, okay, how do I coach this double team versus how does this guy coach this double team, or how does this guy coach this type of pass set versus that, and that's kind of getting in the weeds. So it's no different than any other position. Guys have different variants of opinion on how to play certain techniques. That was not a very good unit this year, to say the least. I mean, let's just get real. I think the thing that I was probably a little bit disappointed in is, I mean, we can talk about they haven't recruited great at that position. Obviously, when you start looking at who they've signed over the course of the last 3 or 4 years and who's a productive player at ECU, and there's not many of them. But that being said, there's guys who played worse this year than they did the previous year. So that's a referendum on the coaching change. It is what it is. Guys who played for Shank didn't play at as high of a level last year. Now, some of it might have been, in the case of one guy moving from the right side to the left side. And sometimes that does make a big difference because the guy's used to playing with this foot up and that foot up and all that kind of good jazz that we don't have to get into. But, we'll see what happens. But my guess is Coach Baker's got a guy he feels good about, and he'll be bringing him with him to ECU.
All right, Chad Pike has clarified his question. He said, why wouldn't a previous ECU quarterback be a good fit to hire? He's saying, like, yes, like a quarterback coach. So John David Baker will be the quarterback's coach. Now, we get this, Brett, and you probably have heard it as much as anybody. Hey, bring back Shane Carden.
Sure.
as quarterbacks coach, or heck, bring him back as OC. People say, hey, bring back Holden Ahlers as quarterbacks coach. I've always said, look, I've got no problem with those guys coming back as a GA or an analyst, but you just can't come back and, no offense to Shane, he's doing a good job as a high school coach in Idaho, but you can't go from that to calling plays at ECU. Like, there's a process to it. So could he come as a GA or an analyst if he wants to make that leap and then in a few years be a very quality quarterback or OC? Maybe, but it's just easier said than done. Just because a guy was a great college quarterback doesn't make him a fit for a quarterback coach at ECU.
I
So
mean, the world is full of guys who are great players. Then I have no idea how good of a coach Shane is. This is absolutely no referendum on his coaching or any other former ECU coach that's ECU player that's out there coaching. Heck, there's a lot of them that are great high school coaches, and hey, East Carolina's got a former quarterback who's probably about to coach the Heisman Trophy winner, and
he's
now
getting some head coaching interest as
Shane
well.
Carden was a lot better player than Joe Sloan. I do know that, and I'll tell Sloaner that in a heartbeat. But um, the world's full of guys who are great players that can't coach their way out of a wet paper bag. I mean, let's look at all these college basketball coaches who were longtime NBA guys that they're not very good coaches. And the same thing with football all over the place. But there's some that are great coaches. There's some guys who can do them both. And if I know anything about Shane as a player, he had all the qualities that you would need to be a great coach. Uber competitive and incredibly bright and intellectual. But it's a big step up to go from being player to offensive coordinator or quarterback coach with limited to no college experience. But yeah, I mean, there's a chain that you do. You do the GA thing, you do the analyst thing, and then you hop into it.
Just like John David Baker, he was a GA, he was an analyst, tight ends coach, co-OC, and now he's the OC. Like, there's a process to it.
Right.
Sometimes you got to get a little lucky, Brad. I mean, coaching is a crazy industry. You got to be in the right place at the right time, right connection. So it all comes full circle. All right, Michael says, has there been any comments yet from the current commits, especially the O-line recruits? I have not reached out to the commits because I've been waiting to give Baker some time to get into the role. I think this week when he hits the road recruiting, I will start reaching out. Like, I know he's supposed to go see Cole Hodge, the quarterback commit, so we'll talk to him at some point this week and get some feedback. But trying to give him time to get his feet wet in the position. Justin is in the chat. He says, "What's up, guys?" Yeah, again, if you got a question on Facebook or YouTube, drop it in. We'll get to it. All right, Brandon, we've kind of already gotten into this. Being he's coming from the SEC, what kind of offenses you expect to run here at East Carolina? So we talked about that. But Brett, what would you say? And Brandon, you can go back and listen to the archive version and kind of hear the scheme breakdown. We've kind of texted, and you've indicated speed is going to be a big part of this at the skill positions. I mean, obviously, if you're going to test teams vertically, horizontally, you got to have some speed at skill spots, and that's a weakness for ECU right now. I mean, you've got Javius Bond at running back, but you don't have too many burners offensively. So I think that's an area they're going to have to hit in the portal. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you got to get guys who can take the top off the defense. So the guys that are running this offense right now of like-minded of what Coach Kiffin's been doing. Jeff Lebby at Oklahoma ran it. Josh Heupel at Tennessee runs a version of it. You got to get guys who can blow the top off the defense. So the passing game starts with vertical concepts, what they call the vertical choice. So the outside guys kind of, if he's even, he's leaving. If the guy's playing off coverage, he's going to turn it into a, basic curl route. They can also turn it back into running right back down the sideline route. But, if you're gonna play the guys, it's as simple as you can make it. If you're gonna play the safeties deep and play, 4 shell coverage on the back end, you got to be able to run the ball, block 5 for 5, 6 for 6, or whatever you're doing. But if they're gonna send guys up, the willingness to throw the football down the field. I don't think that's unique to the SEC. I don't think it's unique to the AAC. I mean, I think that type of offense can work. Really from high school football all the way to the National Football League. And you're seeing versions of it all over the place, even at the highest level of football. So, it can work at East Carolina the same way it works at Ole Miss. I would argue it's probably got a better chance of working at the G5 level than it does the SEC, just because the corners are not as good, and the ability to lock up and play man to man is not there the way it is at the Southeastern Conference level, of course.
Aaron Watson says, "Do we think the tight end utilization will be better?" Um, I mean, I feel like it almost has to be. I don't know. I mean, a lot of the Ole Miss stuff, there was a lot of 11 personnel, so I feel like we'll continue to see that, but maybe some different variations of it. We'll see how the tight end room looks next year. Brett, Shane Calhoun does have a year of eligibility remaining. You've got the two freshmen, Antonio Ferguson, Desirio Riles, who got some experience this year. So, what do you think tight end utilization? Do you feel like that'll be an improvement with this offense?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't utilize anything last year, guys. I mean, like the receiver utilization
Yeah,
wasn't good, the running game utilization wasn't good, but like I would argue that Donnie did a really good job using Ryan Jones.
he
You know, that,
definitely did.
that, that guy had 500 or 600 yards receiving, and he caught a lot of balls. So, like, I don't know if it was just a tight end problem. It was a crappy offensive problem across the board. I mean, it is what it is. We didn't use the tight end, but we didn't catch the ball at receiver. We didn't run the ball very well. We
Didn't
didn't
pass
throw it
protect.
very well. Didn't pass protect. Didn't run protect. So, like, it's hard to put it just on the play calling from a tight end, but the guy did coach the tight ends at Ole Miss, as Luke just said in the chat. So my guess is I've sat in staff meetings my whole life. Now I haven't coached offense a lot. I've only coached offense for 2 years, but I do know when you're in there and you think you got a good player, you spend a lot of time kind of fighting for your guy and how to get him the ball. So he's probably got some ideas that are tight end centric, having coached that position. Um, I haven't. I'd be lying if I said I was an Ole Miss football aficionado. Um, but they've moved the football, and I guess they probably use the tight end fairly well.
No doubt they actually added the Memphis kid, Caden Prescorn this past year, who he killed ECU last season, and I think he had a pretty good year for Ole Miss as a transfer this year. So it'd be nice to get a guy of his talent to utilize at that position. I think Calhoun could be a solid player, and I think DeSirio and Antonio will as well. But we'll see how that room looks year over year. When you look at the offense right now, Brett, like what are the redeeming returning qualities as far as personnel? Like I think you got somebody in Chase Sowell. I think you've got a guy in Javius Bond. If Rajay Harris comes back, you got an experienced back who finally kind of looked more like himself in the Tulsa game.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty good about running back and Chase Sowell and maybe the tight end room. You do have some offensive linemen returning with experience, so the play has been up and down. So what do you make of the personnel and at this point, given what we know?
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken or egg theory, or chicken and egg kind of argument. Like, was the personnel not as redeeming because they, couldn't hold up in protection, or they didn't have anybody that could get them the ball? Um, I would say this about the scheme that's been used the last couple of years. What Donnie did a great job of in 20, I guess that was 2022, is he had a dude on the outside, and it wasn't as much about scheming him up. If he had a one-on-one, they were going to take a shot, right? Um, so to our detriment and to our, kind of double-edged sword deal, that was great because Isaiah could go out and make the play. And when CJ Johnson moved inside, you were able to take advantage of those one-on-ones, whether or not it was slot fades or little slot post routes or whatever it was. So you had two guys that could win those one-on-one battles, and that's fine. That's a very sound offensive philosophy, but it is predicated on having guys that can win one-on-one matchups, right? Um, so that's the problem. Is like you didn't see any of those guys this year consistently do that. But that being said, like, we're not privy to the all 22 tape. Those guys might be out there turning these DBs wide open around, and we just can't get them the ball because we couldn't protect or we couldn't throw it accurately. I did see a lot of drops. That's something that they're going to have to attack in the offseason. We got to catch the football better. So it's really hard to tell. I do not think it was a very talented football team, and I backed. Now, coaches are responsible for that too. Now, this is not high school football. High school guys, you coach what you got most of the time, and it is what it is. So the coaches are still accountable for the product they put on the field. But I always lean more toward the side that it was as much of a problem of personnel deficiency as much as it was scheme. So they got to get better players, and that they're working on that right now. But there's some guys there. Chase, I think, is going to be all right. I think Shane Calhoun's a solid player, and I think there's some guys. I think there's some guys in the running back room, and there are some linemen that you can build around. Here's the deal with offensive linemen, guys. The devil sometimes is better than the guy that you don't know, that you don't have. And everybody talks about these guys. Well, do we want them back? If they've played college football, you want them back.
Yes.
Because you want 8 or 9 guys that can play there. And you want them to get better, you want them to get bigger, and you want them to get stronger. Because if you're out there searching in the portal for a bunch of offensive linemen that can play at the FBS level, there's not a lot of them. And if they are, they're getting scooped up. I mean, there's a reason there's a kid in Division II ranks that's been offered by everybody in the country, including East Carolina. He's going to wind up at Clemson or Oregon or somewhere like that because everybody's looking for the same one. That's 6'6" and can move and got great hip flexion, and those guys are unicorns. There's just not a lot of them out there. So if you've got any on your roster that have any redeeming qualities, you got to keep them and you got to coach them up, and they got to play better.
No doubt. I mean, there's a reason Rashad Strother got $300,000 to go be a backup at Oregon. So I mean,
Right.
it's just there's not enough of them. And he was a solid player at ECU, but he wasn't even an all-conference guy. So everybody's searching for him. You got to be creative, and you always got to develop them. And I do think if you can get like one good tackle, one number one receiver, and this is a lot easier said than done, I should clarify, and a quarterback, if you can get those 3 pieces and a couple more, I think everybody else can kind of slide in and be a little better than they were last year based upon being able to take a little pressure off them. And we'll see. They just got to find a way to hit on those. Speaking of that, Brandon asked, the transfer portal opens tomorrow. That is correct, Brandon. It'll be open officially tomorrow. Guys have already been declaring, and then they'll enter tomorrow, and you'll have some new guys entering tomorrow. Brett will no longer be able to sleep starting tomorrow as that starts for every coach.
The portal has actually been open already.
Yeah.
It's always open for graduate transfers or guys who lose their coach. But tomorrow it's going to be mass chaos.
Yeah.
And,
every
kind of what I'm
undergrad.
hoping is a lot of these guys we've been recruiting for a few weeks in Anderson, as there's 9,000 kids who are going to enter tomorrow, kind of get buried beneath everybody and nobody can find them. So, yeah, it's chaos, and it's going to be chaos. But yes, it opens for undergraduates tomorrow.
Chuck says, if we get a quarterback in the portal, how much will it cost? Do we have money allocated for this position? Chuck, so I've heard that ECU is thinking they'll probably have to spend around $100,000, maybe a little more than that, closer to 200 for a quarterback at their tier. Look, I mean, there's going to be quarterbacks that get millions of dollars. There's going to be quarterbacks that get 300 to 600,000, close to $1 million. I don't think ECU is going to be able to navigate in that space. I think that's more of, the Power 5, the SEC, et cetera, the schools with the big time money. But you can still get a very good quarterback for the money ECU has, I think, in the NIL collective. I don't know, Brad. You probably don't have to deal with this as much. But do you hear any talks of what quarterbacks are being offered right now, across college football?
Tell you what NIL means at the Division II level: nothing in locker. So no, I mean, you hear all kinds of mess, but you have no. I mean, we're sitting here right here in Clemson country, about 20 miles away, and we're only about an hour from Georgia. So, I mean, you hear the nonsense that fans throw around out here. You don't know what's true and what's not. I mean, it's just it is what it is. My thing is that there's not that many schools who have that kind of money. From an East Carolina perspective, you start kind of getting overwhelmed by the 65 arbitrary P5 schools, but like Wake Forest don't have 500,000 to give a quarterback. Duke probably doesn't either. And you hear about Texas A&M and M and Georgia and Alabama and all these guys, but like, if you got 50 grand around, you can get somebody. I would imagine. But again, I'm speaking from pure speculation and not a very educated opinion as it pertains to this new world of college football. And as far as I'm concerned right now, those guys can have it.
Yeah, a lot less stress on Brett's plate at the D2 level with that for sure. We'll get a few more questions in. We'll get out of here. So if you got any questions, drop them now. We had a question earlier. Let's see if I can find it here. From Chuck. He says, if Blake Harrell goes, who do we get for defensive coordinator? I think you go in house, right? I mean, it's got to be Roy Test or Trip Weaver, just based off the fact they know this defense, and you could probably keep it together. What do you think, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're playing well that side of the ball and things are going well, then if you've got somebody in the program that you believe has not only the knowledge of the defense but the requisite leadership skills that it takes to lead a room, then you just promote from within. If the defense falls apart, then we're going to be looking for a new head football coach. So um, I don't expect the defense to fall apart. Let me say that. I think the world of Coach Harrell and the job that and Mike Houston's a good defensive coach too. Let's not get lost in all that. That I know it wasn't a great season, but the guy's got decades worth of putting a good product on the field. And I realize it probably hadn't been up to the standard that everybody thought it would have at East Carolina, but I feel really good about the defense. They've the hit rate of recruiting has been much higher on that side of the ball. Um, and I think the consistency in the staff, and having some consistency year to year with Roy, with Tripp, with Blake, I think it's just allowed for linear growth on that side of the ball, with it really being the product that we've been waiting on that side of the ball this year. And if they can get a little bit of help offensively and be off the field a little bit more, good Lord knows the sky might be the limit, and that might be a top 20 defense next year, I think, or at least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and honestly, just from talking with folks, and again, very early in the offseason, things can change quickly with the portal, with coaching. It feels like Blake Harrell right now doesn't have anything that's prying him away from ECU. Again, things can always change. With the key defensive players, it feels like they're pretty locked in. You never know, because when they go home for Christmas break, families get in their ear, agents, whatever, get in their ear and can change their mind. But it just feels like right now that group is ready to come back, and they don't want to leave ECU at 2-10. A lot of that group is a junior, senior class, rising senior class. I think they feel motivated to come back and win with some offensive players. All right. Brandon says, saw today East Carolina offered Ty Keys. That happened a while ago, but he is the number one JUCO quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, if ECU wants to go the JUCO route, I would expect, Keys was at Southern Miss. He's a mobile guy. I think if you bring him in, he's definitely not the only quarterback you bring in, but he could fit this offensive scheme potentially. So that's something John David Baker is going to have to look at and make a call on. And we'll just have to continue to monitor the quarterback situation moving forward. Brett, as we get close to wrapping things up here, what 2 or 3 things are you really going to be monitoring the next week, 2 weeks as we move forward to kind of see how this offensive plan comes together? Like, what are you most honed in on as you follow your beloved Pirates?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it starts with the trigger position. What are his plans at quarterback? What is he like? And I'll be honest, I probably won't have much time to really dive in on a whole lot of it. But what's he looking for in a quarterback? Does he want a guy who can run a little bit? What kind of system has the guy played in before? I that'll kind of tell you a little bit. The other thing I'm interested in, is staffing. What kind of guy, what kind of background is the O line guy he bringing in with him? What does he have? Obviously, I think he'll have some autonomy in the running back position. What happens to the rest of the offensive staff, both on the field and off the field, the remaining full time coaches and the analysts. Um, and then I think there's some interesting questions to be asked to the head football coach. I think that's a bad leader allows things that are obviously not working to continue to happen. A transcendent leader sees the problems before they actually exist, which is what makes Nick Saban the greatest coach of all time. For instance, kind of morphing into this modern style of offense before he really needed to. They won the national championship, and 2 years later, he went from handing it off and beating LSU 17-6 to throwing it all over the place, and he kind of saw it. But a good leader does what Mike Houston does too. He didn't lose the locker room last year. But there are questions. Is he going to be totally comfortable with playing a style of offense that is not in the traditional sense of bleeding the clock, running the football, run, punt, or, run, play action, whatever. So, I mean, I think there's going to be questions, but it does sound like with how this is me and you spitballing right here, but I think Alan Mogurts was his guy on the offensive line, and the fact that he let him go to let Coach Baker kind of make the call, maybe on the O line coach or on other guys, it kind of tells me he's letting go of the reins a little bit. And like I said at the top of the podcast right here, he's not he Mike Houston is not swimming or swinging for a single right now. He's trying to hit a home run, and he kind of understands a single may or may not have saved his job, but a strikeout, he's going to lose it. And if it doesn't get better, he won't be the head football coach at East Carolina next year. And whether or not he made this decision on his own, which, agents rule the world. I think that's important to know that, if Jimmy Sexton's his agent, he kind of got a list of names probably from that world, but then he made a decision to go with something that's different than anything he's ever ran offensively. And I think that says a lot about how committed he is to fixing it. But if it doesn't work out, that, he's got a career price to pay. But that tells me that he is confident that he's made the right call. And I think he'll answer the questions the right way. But again, as we all know, the proof's in the pudding. We're all from Missouri when it comes to college football. We're in a show me state, and that's what we're looking about going forward. And I do think it was the right decision when you started talking about the guys, and hopefully Coach Baker is the right guy at the right time.
I've said all along, it feels like to me it's either going to be the Mike Houston revenge tour and the Pirates win big next year, or the opposite happens. And I guess much like this year, 2-10, if not worse. But I don't know. Every time I talk to Coach Houston or people around the program, he's like, "We're not going through what we did last year again."
He didn't. He did not lose the locker room, and
Yeah.
people think that's coach speak, but those kids kept fighting, and that tells me a lot. In my opinion, if they're still fighting for him, there's a prayer. And if this team figures it out offensively, you can turn it around quick. And I won't be surprised if they do and they're back at 7 or 8 wins again next year. But I'm kind of like the rest of the Pirate Nation now, man. It's now or never. It's got to get done, or we're going to be looking for another coach, which I don't want. I want Mike Houston to succeed.
No doubt. A couple of late questions we'll get to, and then we'll get out of here. I do want to announce, so if you missed our 75% off VIP sale on Hoisted Colors, with the transfer portal starting tomorrow, we're going to have another sale through 24/7 Sports, 60% off. So make sure to subscribe. It'll be a 3-day period for all your VIP content. This will take you through next year, annual price, recruiting, all that sort of stuff, transfer portal news, continue coaching changes, all that. We will have you covered just like we covered the OC search And our longtime subscribers, you get a free subscription to Paramount Plus. Instructions on how to activate that are at the top of our message board. And then we also said earlier, make sure you subscribe to the Hoist the Colors 94.3 The Game podcast channel. Get a lot of questions about where's the Hoist the Colors podcast. Well, we do it in addition to our radio show. A lot of people get that mixed up as well. All right, any idea from Chad? He says, any idea who else we actually talked to about being the offensive coordinator? We discussed that at the beginning of the show. Bailey from Ohio State and also Chad Morris were in the mix, and John David Baker got the job. There may have been others as well, but those were the two main guys we heard. All right, lastly, we'll close with this because who knows how long we'll go. Brandon says, not an ECU topic. How do y'all feel about Alabama getting to the college football playoff over an undefeated FSU team? I mean, for me, it's pretty simple, Brett. Like, it's the most deserving versus the best team argument. And the best, the better team to me is Alabama. Florida State, I feel like, is
At this
certainly deserving.
stage.
Yeah, absolutely. With Travis out. And so I hate it for Florida State. I can see both sides. It's just it just sucks to go 13-0 and be left out of a 14 playoff. But with Travis out, you can make an argument both ways.
No, I mean, you can't watch that team Florida State put on the field and think they'd have a chance to win it. But it's also hard for me as a football coach to be able to stomach sitting in front of your team who won every football game and not have a chance to play for a national title. But that stems from the fact that there is a systematic problem in major college football that doesn't exist anywhere else in sports. We don't have a playoff. We have an invitational. So anywhere there's a system in which a team can win every game it plays and not have a chance to play for a national championship is ridiculous. It doesn't exist at the FCS level. It doesn't exist at the Division II level. It doesn't exist at the Division III level. It doesn't exist at the high school level. It doesn't exist in the National Football League. It doesn't exist in college basketball, Major League Baseball, whatever. If you win your conference from the SEC all the way down to the MAC, you should have a chance to be in a tournament to play for a national title. So some of this is going to be alleviated by getting to 12, but the fact that we don't have automatic bids for every conference champion is asinine and stupid, and it's been stupid forever. But, again, to me, this is a true playoff would have that. If you want to have the top 16 teams, take the 10 conference champions and then add the 6 best teams, but give everyone at the level a chance to play for a national championship. So that's how I feel. I do think Alabama's better than Florida State at this stage. So, under the current system, I think they got it right, but it sucks. It's also, I think it's going to be the end of the ACC. I think, these people down here in Tiger Country are about ready to leave. And I think Florida State will leave the first chance they can really make it work. And then there's a few more schools in the ACC that the SEC or the Big Ten would flounder over. And then that could actually affect East Carolina, because if you have an ACC leftover of, Wake Forest and Duke and Virginia Tech or whatever, you could see East Carolina kind of being in a ACC or an AAC with the ACC leftovers, which would actually be good for our program in my estimation.
Yeah, ECU's just got to stop crapping the bed every time conference realignment.
Every freaking time.
Every
man.
time.
I mean,
it's
like
unbelievable.
I mean, it's like
you can only shake your head.
They're probably in the Big East if they don't fall apart late in the Logan era. Well, they probably would have been in the Big East at the turn of the century, and then of course the Big East again in the late Ruffin years. It just has never worked out, and it's really frustrating, and it's sad because I hate the arbitrary G5 Power 5 level type stuff. But the reality is that when East Carolina is good at football, that environment is on par with anybody. And I've been at a lot of places in the country. I've seen multiple games in my life in Raleigh, in Blacksburg, in Chapel Hill, in Columbia, Clemson, Athens. I've been to all of them. And when Dowdy Ficklin is rocking, it's as good as any of them, if not better. And I think that's the thing that probably frustrates me and everybody that's on your site as much as anything.
No doubt. All right. So, all right, this is seriously the last one. Because you're a Jamie Chadwell guy, uh, Ryan King, not the ECU receiver, but a different Ryan King, says, shaking my head, or he says SMU for Liberty for the group of five. Look, man, 133 ranked strength of schedule out of 133 teams. I can't get on board with that. I give credit to Liberty for winning every game, but SMU, I mean, if Liberty had SMU's schedule, I don't think they go 13-0. And this is just an argument. You know, you can make it both ways again. Chadwell did a heck of a job there. Year one, Liberty, for those that don't realize it, has tremendous resources, a ton of money.
Unbelievable.
They don't, you know, everybody looks at Liberty as a notch below a team like ECU, and it's just not true. So credit to Liberty.
Liberty has the chance. Liberty has the chance to be a perennial top 15 program with the resources they've got. They got more money than they can print.
So, what do you think? Did Chadwell and his boys deserve it, or should you have? Would you have liked to seen SMU get in?
They won every game they played, so it's hard to say they didn't deserve it. Do I think they're better than SMU? Probably not, but you know, again, it's a systematic problem of where we're at. They both should be in a national tournament playing for a national championship. I mean,
so dumb, yeah.
It's a stupid rule. I mean, we let the champion of Conference USA in the basketball tournament every year, and you know, was FAU in the Conference USA last year?
They went pretty far.
They won 4 games. So you know, now that would not happen in football. You know, I don't think a Conference USA team could win a 32-team tournament in football, but they deserve the opportunity to play for it, just like SMU does. And you know, systematic problem. I'm glad for Jamie. I like Jamie. I love Jamie. He gave me my start in coaching, and he's going to continue to do great things there. But again, whatever. I mean, to me, I'm still pissed that the Pirates are not in that discussion and really haven't flirted with it yet. So,
no doubt.
Hopefully that'll happen in the future.
We get Jamie Chadwell, Mike Houston in 2024, so that'll be. We'll have to get you back on the podcast going into that game.
Well, I'll be coaching, but I've got some. I got some interesting VIP stories on that relationship.
All right, Brett, this has been fun, man. Appreciate the time. Know you're busy, and we had a ton of viewers, a ton of interest. So we'll get you back on down the road, man, when you get some free time. But glad to hook up once again and excited about the future of Pirate football with John David Baker in this offense. So appreciate all the time, man.
Thanks, Steven, and go Pirates.
All right, that's Brett Hickman. I'm Steven Igo. We will be back with the Hoist the Colors podcast at a later date. Again, subscribe to the Hoist the Colors 94.3 The Game channel. We'll be back on Monday at 12 noon with our live edition. We'll also have a press conference with John David Baker, and I believe Mike Houston Monday at 1. We'll have full comments, full video from that as well on our Hoist the Colors YouTube page. We'll talk to you next time.